Hey guys, what is up? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we'll be taking a look at the Balrogs featured in the Lord of the Rings expanded universe. The Valruka, or Balrogs as they were known on Middle-earth, were an extremely powerful demonic race of fallen Maiar found in Tolkien's fantasy series. Although they were Maiar, they actually belonged to a subgroup of fiery spirits that had come to Arda with pure intentions before being corrupted by Melkor. One of the most notable creatures of the First Age, they'd undergone many changes by Tolkien, from a race that numbered thousands to one that featured no more than 7 at a time. Another aspect of the Balrogs that changed throughout time was their size, strength, and physical composition, with later revisions making them appear more elemental. And this was of course the fiery and nigh indestructible representation that had been chosen for the magnificent films directed by Peter Jackson. The Balrogs are described as tall, menacing beings that can shroud themselves in fire, darkness, and shadow. Often appearing with fiery whips and long swords, the creatures were difficult to defeat, requiring skill, power, and a certain stature to overcome their immensity, so much so that only dragons rivaled their capacity for destruction. According to the Silmarillion, Melkor had corrupted lesser Maiar to his service before the creation of Arda, who came to be known as Demons of Might. Upon the awakening of the Elves, the Valar captured Melkor and destroyed his fortresses, completely overlooking the deepest pits where, with many of Melkor's other allies, the Balrogs had fled into hiding. If you're unsure what the terms Maiar and Valar mean, I've left a link to my playlist on the Lord of the Rings which covers these below. Now, when Melkor returned to Middle-earth from Valinor under the name of Morgoth, he had joined forces with Ungoliant, a primordial being that had taken the shape of a gigantic spider. Though their partnership was mutually beneficial at first, Ungoliant kept growing to an incredible size and the two eventually fell out, leading to a massive conflict. Hearing the screams of their Dark Lord Morgoth, the Balrogs came out of hiding towards his aid and joined him in battle. The Valruka were exceptionally powerful creatures, and only 7 of them were required to drive away Ungoliant, who I should point out was strong enough to devour the fruits of Telporion, the silver tree of Valinor, which was a source of water and light for the Valar. I plan on covering Melkor, Ungoliant, and their incredible confrontation in more detail down the track, but suffice to say that the spider withdrew its attack, unable to compete with the combined strength of Morgoth and 7 of his mighty Balrogs. Gothmog, the lord of the Balrogs during the First Age, was probably the greatest of their race ever to walk Middle-earth. His only equal in rank at the time was Sauron, who I've also extensively covered on this channel and will leave links to below. Now, Gothmog had taken part in many successful campaigns on behalf of his master, and was personally responsible for the deaths of 2 High Kings of Noldor, including Fëanor, one of the greatest elves to have ever lived, who, incidentally, was the creator of the 3 gems known as the Silmarils. This fiery beast carried a whip into battle like the rest of his kin, but he was also known to wield a great dark battle axe feared by the elves. A single Balrog named Durin's Bane also managed to drive the dwarves of Moria away from their ancient and supremely fortified home, which at that time was the greatest kingdom of the dwarves that had been built. Bane was also able to contend with Gandalf in a conflict that lasted 10 days, and was able to shatter the side of a mountain with its physical might alone. In the film adaptations, the production team had taken creative license with the Balrogs, giving them a skull-like head with horns which was wrapped in flames. They also had an enormous humanoid body, reaching a height of 20 feet, unlike the creatures in the novels which were only slightly larger than men. Their massive size was also supported by giant hind legs that featured razor-sharp claws. While the Balrogs had a tough, blackish exoskeleton that made them impervious to most attacks, their interior seemed to be composed of pure fire. As a master of both shadow and flame, Durin's Bane was also able to materialize its weapons from the flames that powered it, making it look like they had been conjured into existence. As mentioned earlier, Tolkien's perception of the creatures changed drastically over time, and his son Christopher, who was the editor for much of his father's posthumous work, stated that in the earlier versions, the Balrogs were less terrible and more vulnerable, but as they were refined, the Balrogs were changed into fallen Maiar, making them significantly more powerful. One of the most hotly debated aspects of the Balrogs is whether or not they had functional wings. This still remains unclear and is open to interpretation, due partly to Tolkien's changing perception of them, and his suggestive and possibly figurative contradictory description of Durin's Bane in The Lord of the Rings with these 2 quotes. His enemy halted again, facing him, and the shadow about it reached out like 2 vast wings. Suddenly, it drew itself up to a great height, and its wings were spread from wall to wall. I mean, the argument hinges on whether the wings are physical or simply figurative. Honestly, either interpretation works, and there isn't enough description in his writings to settle the matter definitively. With this in mind, the film adaptation did give them wings. However, we didn't get a chance to see whether they were functional, with both Gandalf and Bane falling during their fight at great speeds. Either way, it should be noted that both Gandalf and the Balrogs both belong to a different subgroup of the Maiar, which meant that although their physical form could be destroyed, their spirits would endure forever, and this was essentially how Gandalf the Grey was able to return as the more powerful Gandalf the White.
Show yourself! It cannot be.
I've been sent back until my task is done. Gandalf? Gandalf the Grey. That was my name.
Gandalf.
I am Gandalf the White.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks to all of you guys who requested we explore the terrifying Balrogs featured in Tolkien's expanded universe. If there's any other stuff you'd like me to check out, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.